So we just had the developer live stream and the patch notes going into season 14. So everything here is what we will be getting in season 14 in terms of big changes and balancing stuff. Now in this video, I want to go over uniques and the new Mythic system, what they're calling Mythic Uniques 3.0, because this is realistically the biggest new thing coming with the season outside of the season theme specific content. And this new Mythic Unique system is going to be a permanent system to the game. Most things I go over in this video for this new unique or Mythic Unique system are permanent additions to the game. Pretty much the only thing that isn't permanent within this system is one of the ways to craft these Mythic Uniques. And we did get some pretty massive changes to this system after the PTR. So if you saw my previous video going over the system as it was on PTR, there's some pretty big changes, some of which is good and along the lines of where we should be going, but they made one really big change with these that they kind of completely failed at what the players actually wanted out of this change. So we'll go over all of that. So first, we should go over what the Mythic Unique system is if you haven't heard about this yet. So if you've been playing Diablo for pretty much any season or any of the recent seasons, you'll have seen that we have normal unique items, then we have a rarity above that that are mythics and that are purple. Now going into Mythics 3.0, both of these things are changing. So when we go into Mythic Uniques 3.0, all unique items in the game can now randomly drop as a mythic, or there are some ways to craft them. Now when a normal unique becomes a mythic, its special effect is increased by 30%. So its special effect will be much stronger, especially since a lot of the best uniques in the game have like a multiplicative damage increase. So increasing those by another 30% is really strong. This also means that if that specific unique, let's say, has a really high roll on it, something like the Lightbringer for the Druid or the Thunder God's Blessing Ring that just have really high damage increases, those will be increased even more, because a 30% increase of like a 250% multiplicative damage increase is a lot higher than like a 30% increase on a 60% multiplicative increase. So certain uniques will be much stronger than others based upon this, but that's just the first part. On top of this, all of the affixes on that mythic will now always be their max roll. This doesn't mean they're a greater affix or anything. They won't roll higher than they normally could, but they will always be max roll. Let's say on a normal unique item, you could get 80 to 100 health on it. If you get a mythic, it will always be 100 health. So they're essentially a buffed up version of normal uniques pretty much in every way. Now, like I mentioned, the mythics that you're probably used to from previous seasons are also being changed in that they are essentially just the same as every other mythic. So they're pretty much the same as unique items upgraded to mythics. They nerfed a lot of the strongest ones, so a bunch of them have a bit different effects. A lot of them had their most unique affix added to their effect. Like for instance, the helm that everybody was using, Air Perdition, it used to be an 80% multiplicative damage increase, is now 15%, and then they added the 15% crit affix roll to its special effect. So now it's a 15% crit increase and a 15% multiplicative damage increase. And one of the reasons they did this is because these old mythics, or what they're now calling iconic mythics, are also randomly rolled, or they're essentially rolling the same as normal mythics would, or upgraded uniques would. And it doesn't seem most or any of the iconic mythics have higher affix rolls like they used to. Like if you go to Lord of Hatred right now and you look at a Ring of Star of the Sky, the affixes on it are higher than any other ring could normally get. That doesn't seem to be the case either. So iconic mythics are literally just on the exact same tier as these new mythics that are just upgraded unique items. So pretty much any mythic is essentially on the same tier now. But that brings us into how will these uniques and mythics be rolling their affixes. So for all uniques, mythics, or iconic mythics, they will all now have 2 statically rolled affixes and 2 randomly rolled affixes, but there's also going to be another way to roll one of the random affixes. Now this is much more along the lines of what I wanted. If you've watched my previous videos going over the system, this is the exact thing I wanted them to do. I wanted them to do a mix between the old uniques that all had static rolls and the new ones that were completely random. And that's basically what we got. 2 static rolls. So if you get a bunch of duplicates of the same unique, same mythic, or same iconic mythic, there will be 2 affixes on it that are always the same. Now that's good. The big issue with this is the affixes they chose for these, because none of the affixes on pretty much any of the uniques or mythics or iconic mythics in the game have unique affixes on them like we previously had. Because you go to before Lord of Hatred and you look at any unique, it had a bunch of unique affixes that you couldn't get on other items, like plus to passive stats or just unique affixes that buffed up something specific that you would be using with that unique. And they did not bring that back, and that's really the main thing that everybody, including me, was asking for. These 2 statically rolled affixes on all of the new uniques and mythics is good, but we wanted these static rolls to be unique and have special affixes on them. So outside of not getting the unique affixes as these static rolls, for most items they also chose rolls that aren't very good. Like if you go look at the list, and they have a list in the patch notes of every single unique, the vast majority of offensive uniques now give plus to skill ranks. Now if you know how Diablo 4 works and you've played in Lord of Hatred, you would know that plus to skill ranks is a pretty weak stat now. Specifically, it's a pretty weak stat now because you can get +3 to basically all skill ranks of all of your skills from charms quite easily, and you can have up to 6 charms. So at a baseline, pretty early on in the season, you can get +15 to pretty much any of your skills, and it's very easy to get it on your main skill, and more than likely there's some category that will hit almost all of your skills. So let's say it's your main damaging ability, you have 15 points in it at a baseline from your skill tree, then 15 from your charms, you are heavily into diminishing returns. The more skill ranks you have on an item, the less damage increase you get for future skill ranks. And with say those 30 skill ranks, you're heavy into diminishing returns. So basically on a vast majority of the uniques and mythics that are in offensive slots that can get plus ranks, you now have a very weak stat on them because it's just so easy to get plus skill ranks, and a lot of the other items just also have like quite weird affix rolls on them. It's really going to depend on your class and the uniques you're using or the generic uniques, but a lot of them are not optimal at all. And at a baseline, this means that a lot of the uniques in the game, whether they're mythics or not, have been nerfed at what they could potentially be. And my big issue with this is that they added not unique affixes, so these aren't like interesting, and most of them are generally weaker than what we could get in the game right now as random rolls. So they're not more interesting, and they're generally weaker. So while I like that now we have 2 static rolls and 2 random rolls, which is what I wanted, they added like the worst possible affixes you get out on this. Also, pretty much every unique in the game, one of their static rolls is core stat, which is also just the most boring stat in the game. So I don't know why they added really suboptimal affixes on these items, and then also the most boring affix in the game. I legitimately don't know why they did that. My hope is that because this was last minute, like within the few weeks they changed this, my hope is that they just didn't have time to make and add all of these unique affixes to these items, and that in next season we will see them add more unique affixes to these items. So a step in the right direction, but they completely failed at which affixes they were actually adding to these. Now, to add on top of that, another really big change to uniques and mythics is that now you will not be able to use them in the Horadric cube. So going into the PTR for season 14, all uniques and mythics were still going to be randomly rolled affixes, but you were going to be able to roll their affixes in the Horadric cube. They have removed the ability to change affix stats on uniques or mythics in the Horadric cube, but you can now go and enchant that item, meaning you can go to the occultist, choose one stat, and then constantly roll it for gold to get the affix you actually want. This means that when you get a unique or a mythic, you will be able to pretty easily have 3 of the 4 stats you want pretty much right away, because 2 are statically rolled and the other one is just going to be a gold cost at the occultist to get the 3rd stat. So essentially with uniques and mythics now, you are just looking for a singular stat roll that you want, because the other 3 are going to be taken care of. And I think this is probably the best way they could go about this, because this kind of removes the factor of people thinking this was going to be like ultra grindy and you're just gonna have to grind resources to try to randomly roll the affixes on these items, which is how it was on the PTR. And it's also still going to allow for a bit of RNG and a bit of needed grinding for players that like that stuff to get that final affix you actually want. Now you're probably asking, well, how do we obtain these mythic items? Now at a baseline, anytime a unique item drops as an ancestral unique, there's just a low chance that it will become a mythic item when it drops. Pretty much farming any boss in the game where you're going to farm the most amount of uniques you can is still going to be the best way to go about getting mythic items. And presumably this is also the same thing for the iconic mythics, which obviously don't have a normal unique counterpart. So presumably anytime an item from that slot would drop, it could be an iconic mythic, or maybe iconic mythics just drop in the same way they always have, where there's just a higher chance to get it from specific pieces of content. So essentially just a more rare chance from any time you get an ancestral unique, it can just drop as basically its upgraded version, that being a mythic item. Now during the season, there's going to be a ton of ways to get these. First, you'll be able to craft mythic uniques in the cube with a new season specific resource called Pandemonium Fragments, and these are just from a bunch of different content throughout the game. So from doing your season journey and doing the new layer boss, you'll get this new resource that you'll be able to go to the Horadric cube and just turn a unique into a mythic of the same slot. That was also changed from the PTR, where in the PTR there was these categories where it would randomly turn that unique into an item of that category. Now during season 14, you put a unique in the cube, you use this new resource, it'll turn it into a mythic of that slot. So let's say you put in a pair of unique boots, you put in some of these resources, it'll upgrade it to a random pair of mythic boots. So you're not necessarily going to get the boots you want, but you will get a mythic pair of boots, but you will only be able to equip one mythic through this craft. And again, this is season specific. For mythics that just drop normally in the game, you can use as many as you want. Now you will also be able to create mythic uniques from the jeweler using resplendent sparks and runes. So right now, if you go and play in Lord of Hatred, you can craft the mythics we have in game right now with sparks and runes. This is being changed over to just any mythic uniques. And I think this can't be iconic uniques because those will have a different craft. And I think these are by slot as well. So let's say you're looking for a mythic chest piece. You would then go to the jeweler with whatever runes you need and the resplendent sparks, and you would craft a random mythic chest piece. Now, unless they're explaining this incorrectly, it seems that these mythics crafted from the jeweler are also counted towards your one crafted mythic limit. So whether it's through the cube or through the jeweler, you can only have one crafted mythic equipped at a time. But again, any mythic that just drops in the game, you can equip as many of those as you want. And then finally, you will be able to craft iconic mythics at the blacksmith like you can right now, where you take 2 resplendent sparks and you craft the box and it gives you a random iconic mythic. You will still be able to do that, and presumably because there will just be a lot more mythics around because you can get more of them from random stuff, it seems getting iconic mythics will actually be much easier than it was previously. So that may be an upside to this system. Now, there is also going to be a new layer boss added with this season called the Corrupted Reaper, and this boss will specifically have a higher chance to give you mythic unique items. Now, we know the layer boss is a permanent addition to the game. We don't know if this layer boss having a higher chance to give you these mythic uniques is season specific or not. So during this season, you will be able to focus farming this boss to get even higher chances at these mythics. And again, since the boss is dropping the mythic, you will be able to equip as many of those mythics as you want. Now, my overall thoughts on the system is generally positive outside of the affixes they chose for the statically rolled affixes. I think they legitimately chose some of the most boring and weak affixes they could possibly choose to put on these things. Every unique and mythic having one of their static rolls as main stat, just the most boring thing you could do. And then a lot of the other rolls on these items being like plus to skill ranks is again very weak. And like I mentioned, my hope for this is that they just wouldn't have had enough time to make unique affixes for all of the uniques in the game going into season 14. So my hope is that going into season 15, they will be adding more unique affixes to these items. Time will tell on that, but that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.